Hi, I'm Rebecca Balcarcel. Let's talk about Hamlet's to be or not to be speech. First, we have to remember that at this point in the play, Hamlet is pretty troubled. His girlfriend won't pay him any attention, his father's been killed, and his mother married the killer. So his life is pretty difficult. So we're hearing him here philosophize and think about life and death and what's a real courageous person to do. Should you just face life, or maybe you should just end it? Is that really the better choice? So here's his dilemma right here. He starts out to be or not to be. That is the question. Now this phrase is followed by a colon, and that means that he's going to elaborate on what he meant by that opening phrase, to be or not to be, to exist or not to exist. That's the question. Now the elaboration says, whether 'tis nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, or to take arms against a sea of troubles, and by opposing end them. So this is the choice. You suffer the slings and arrows, all the suffering that goes on in the world, all the events that come and trouble us. The slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, this wheel of fate that brings good things and bad things, and good things and bad things, and you're never really safe from the bad things. It's always coming. So whether you just suffer through that, or take arms against that sea of troubles. Now, it's impossible to really take arms against a sea. You're going to lose that battle. But by opposing this sea of troubles, you end the troubles because you die. So if you kill yourself, you are saying, no, I don't want to live this suffering life. I'm going to end my life. I'm going to oppose this sea of troubles, and I will end all the troubles by killing myself. When I'm dead, I won't have these troubles. But then he says to die, to sleep no more. As long as sleep is what death is like, then we're fine. If death is no more than a sleep, then wouldn't that be nice? But he goes on, and by a sleep to say we end the heartache and the thousand natural shocks the flesh is heir to. 'Tis a consummation devoutly to be wished. Wow, yeah, that would be perfect if if this sleep of death would just end the heartache and the thousand natural shocks, all the changes and things that rattle us and startle us. We could just end that. Oh, yes, that's a consummation, an ending, a final ending that is to be wished. Ah, wouldn't it be nice if it were that easy? But he goes on, to die, to sleep perchance to dream. Aye, there's the rub. And the word rub here means kind of like catch. Ah, there's the catch. There's always a catch. It's not so easy. You don't just die and sleep. Actually, you might dream in this death sleep, and that could be a problem. So he says, to sleep, perchance to dream, aye, there's the rub. For in that sleep of death, what dreams may come? Uh-oh, what scary dreams might come? When we have shuffled off this mortal coil, must give us pause. The dreams better give us pause. When we have shuffled off this mortal coil, when we have shuffled off this body and taken off this body, we still might have some trouble, because death may not be just a sleep after all. And mortal coil may have a couple of meanings here. When we shuffle off our body, that makes sense. Also, a coil can be a coil of rope, almost like a coil around your neck, or a coil that restricts you. And if you could shuffle that off, that would be nice. It might even be almost a snake metaphor, that if you could wriggle out of your skin, like a snake can, then that would be nice, except we have these dreams that might come in the sleep of death, and those could give us some trouble. So he says, what dreams may come when we have shuffled off this mortal coil must give us pause. There's the respect that makes calamity of so long life. That means there's the consideration when we give respect to this idea of dreams, troublesome dreams that might come in the sleep of death. Then, we have no choice but to live this long life. And what a calamity that we are stuck with this hardship of a life, and we can't even choose to end it because we're worried about the death sleep. All right. Then he asks a question, for who would bear the whips and scorns of time, the oppressor's wrong, the proud man's contumely? And he's going to list all the things that are annoying about life. Because who would bear this? Who would put up with it if you could just end it with killing yourself? You know, how nice that would be. So he lists things that are annoying about life. Who would bear the whips and scorns of time, the oppressor's wrong, someone who oppresses you and is unfair in that oppression, the proud man's contumely, people being snobbish to you, the pangs of disprized love, love that's not returned, the law's delay. That's a problem. Justice never comes at the right time. It doesn't seem to punish the right people in the right way. The insolence of office, people in high positions thinking they're better than everyone. The spurns that patient merit of the unworthy takes. So people see the unworthy folks get promoted or get praised or get recognized, but they're not even actually worthy people, but they get rewarded anyway. So he says, who would bear all of that when he himself might his quietus make with a bare bodkin? Who would bear that when he could just settle the account with just a mere sword, a mere dagger, actually. A bodkin is a little short knife, a dagger. So why would you put up with all the suffering of life if you could just take a little dagger and end it all? You know, why would you put up with it? And he asks kind of a similar question again. Who would fardels bear to grunt and sweat under a weary life, but that the dread of something after death? Okay, so he says, who would these fardels bear, these burdens bear, to grunt and sweat under a weary life, except this dread? We wouldn't put up with it, except that we're scared, right? But that the dread of something after death, the undiscovered country, from whose bourne no traveler returns, puzzles the will. Okay, let me stop. Something after death, and death here is compared to an undiscovered country, a place that's unknown. No one has returned from there to tell us what it's like, and it's a frightful thing, the unknown. The unknown is more frightening than the known. So he says this dread of something after death, the undiscovered country from whose bourne no traveler returns. So no one returns from that shore to tell us what it's like. And this thought of death puzzles the will and makes us rather bear those ills we have than fly to others that we know not of. So we would rather just put up with the problems we have than to run off toward problems that might be even worse. I mean, what if death is worse than life? Then maybe we better just stay here and stick it out. And I want to mention that this word puzzles is different nowadays than in Shakespeare's time. The fact that death puzzles the will is it means that it confuses the will. It makes it hard for the will to decide what to do. It confounds the will and makes us not actually be able to make a decision. Then he says, thus conscience does make cowards of us all. A great line. Conscience makes us cowards means that, this introspection and reflection upon further thought, we're cowards. See, we're all ready to kill ourselves, and then, we get scared. We get scared of death, and we abort the mission, right? And thus, the native hue of resolution is sicklied o'er with the pale cast of thought. So the native hue, the color that comes into your cheeks, the ruddy redness of resolution that means, a decision that's made and ready to be acted on, but that is sicklied o'er with the pale cast of thought. So upon second thought, that color goes pale, and all that energy that was ready is dissipated and held back. And he goes on to say, and enterprises of great pitch and moment, with this regard, their currents turn awry. So these courageous actions we might do, enterprises of great pitch and moment, important deeds, are, when we think of death, with this regard, their currents, the current of that action just veers away from the original intent and purpose, and lose the name of action. So a decision was made, but then it was not carried out. Now this is interesting because Hamlet himself has a decision that he's made, that he's trying to carry out. He's supposed to avenge the death of his father, and he hasn't done that yet. And indeed, he's a very thoughtful person, so it's as if thought has lost the name of action right in Hamlet's own life. All right, and he ends the speech now when he sees Ophelia, and he says, soft you now, the fair Ophelia, nymph, meaning Ophelia, in thy orisons be all my sins remembered. In your prayers, remember all my sins. And we transition into a scene with Hamlet and Ophelia. So that's the famous to be or not to be speech. I think you'll find, if you do some further research, there's a lot of scholarship on this speech. Many experts have said all kinds of wise things about the speech, more than I can tell you right now. But do some research and find out about other ideas about interpreting this speech, and I think you'll find it worthwhile.